All right, welcome back, baseball fans, to the 79-82 Fall League. Keeping up with the keeps, waives, and retires offseason moves before a draft gets done, as the teams try and get the proper number of players they want to keep, put on waivers, and retire. We're halfway through. We looked at the top 16 or the worst 16 teams in the league. At least trying or attempting to get 4 guys they want to keep, not too many or too few. Not quite perfect yet. Also not quite perfect as far as who's going on waivers and who's being retired. But that's still not that hard to do at the end of the exercise here. But more teams want to initiate some talks, and we're going to start with the 17th team and work our way to the 24th. And what's interesting here in this little group is that things started to quiet down. The fireworks seemed to be in the beginning, as a lot of teams up top had a bunch, like 6 keepers, 5, 5, and all that. And so they had to make moves, and they did. And in this little section here where we're at, 17 to 24, wasn't that volatile. Wasn't a lot of movement. But we expect more fireworks next time when we get from 25 to 32. This is your World Series field trying to tune up by making moves. So this could be a little quiet tonight, which would be kind of nice for once. And so let's begin where we left off. We're going to start with the Houston Astros, who started the process at 5:02:01 and made just one minor move here. Let's check out the Astros. They originally had the 5th keeper was originally it's Craig Reynolds. But then they realized that they wanted Alan Ashby more than Craig Reynolds, who was available in a trade with Milwaukee. So they had enough keepers. They love Cesar Cedeno, they love Jose Cruz, and Ken Forsch. Those are locks. But Ashby is a very valuable catcher. He's got some nice years with the Astros from 80 to 82. And Craig Reynolds is certainly in baseball, playing for the Astros for the rest of his career. His numbers aren't particularly amazing. So he is one of these many shortstops we see in carryover leagues, this one and then in the other league in the fall, where a team's shortstop might be put on waivers and then just re-signed. Gene Michael from the New York Yankees put on waivers. Gene Alley from the Pittsburgh Pirates put on waivers. Craig Reynolds has been put on waivers. And there's a reasonable chance those guys are just going to sit there, and their old team is going to call them up and say, all right, we want you back. We just don't have any room on the keeper list for you. And frankly, it's not if somebody wants to steal that player, they're more than welcome to. So the trade that happened to facilitate all this was the Brewers sending Alan Ashby, who is a keeper, versus and Houston sending Craig Reynolds to the Brewers, but a guy that the Brewers are going to put on waivers. Again, I made this a no-token trade because, frankly, Houston had to trade one of their own guys to get one of their own guys, and Milwaukee isn't interested in either one of them. So it's a zero-token move in that particular instance. So what it ultimately does is it creates Houston's math at 40301. It also helped Milwaukee's math as we go a little further down in this. Let's take the next team here, which was the Tigers. And they kind of didn't do a whole lot either. They still have some things to think about here. There's some guys who happen to be in the same year, and they got to figure out who they're going to pick in this year. It's here we are with Detroit. So Dave Rozema, his last good year is 79. He still plays in 80, 81, 82. But in 79 he's still pretty good. John Hiller's last good year is 79. I think it's the last year they make his card. Whitaker you can push to 82, 83, 84. He's still young. And Aurelio Rodriguez is running out of shelf life here with the Tigers, but he's still a good defensive third baseman until another one shows up. So from all of this, they're just sort of sitting and waiting and see what happens. Because like I said, when we started this process, we're plus 23 in keepers. So we're going to see some guys on the waiver list, and the Tigers might pipe up and say, you know what, let's get rid of Aurelio Rodriguez, see what's on waivers, and move him, make that a keeper. Or even John Hiller, who's a little long in the tooth. You know, maybe they can find somebody else on, you know. So the Tigers are just sitting and waiting. I think we saw that the Cardinals were sitting and waiting until we get more action in this carousel. The Phillies made all their big bangs at the very beginning of this process, and they're going to probably sit and relax for now. They did what they needed to do, which was go get Pete Rose. And yeah, so the Phillies went and got Pete Rose. That's where they started, of course. Let's show you where they went and got Pete Rose, Gary Maddox, Larry Boa, Bob Boone, all like, you know, Philly players, and 4 waiver guys: Tim McCarver, Mike Tyson, Larry Christensen, and Roger Erickson. Doesn't really matter who those guys. If anybody wants to keep them, the Phils are willing to listen to offers for maybe a draft tokens, but otherwise they'll just put a couple of those guys in retirement. Not a big deal for the Phillies. All right, the next team, the Expos, they actually need a keeper. They want a guy to keep. They only have 3. So they're actually looking at shopping around right now. But you know what? They're not really that impressed with a lot of the guys available suddenly, as teams are starting to realize that starter quality guys, that there's a lot of platoon guys are just, it's starting to flatten out. There's no, star players out there to lock up. So the Expos have Cromartie, who has a very good year in 81. Steve Rogers, great year, of course, in 80 and 81. And still a nice year for Tony Perez. And beyond that, they traded for Johnny Grubb, who was on waivers, but they could make him a keeper. He's like a 277 hitter. Jim Wolford, he's also on waivers. They could make, he's like also a 277 hitter. Mark Lee is just a journeyman reliever. And they retired a starting pitcher, Hal Dews, and Buddy Schultz. So basically, what they would look for is replacing these positions. That's an outfielder, and 3 pitchers. The good news is you don't have to worry about starting pitching, because they should have Bill Gullickson and David Palmer in their farm system. So they're going to just bring a rookie in for that one. And as far as an outfielder would be nice, obviously the infield is probably locked up. Not to mention Tim Raines is still second base eligible. He doesn't have to go into your outfield yet. They got Larry Parrish and Tim Foley, and Cromartie and Tony Perez. So you have first base, DH, corner, outfield locked up. And the other thing about the Expos is this timeline 79 to 82. It's time to put up or shut up. This is where this Expo team should win the division. I mean, 79 Expo roster is amazing. 80's very good. 81 gets a playoff appearance. And then it starts to fall down a little bit in 82. So this is where the Expos are going to sit and wait and find the right guy, the 4th guy to keep. And right now, they don't want to make a move. They're going to sit and wait a little longer and see what else materializes in this process. All right, the Cubs started this situation with 6 guys they wanted to keep, and now they're down to the 4 guys they want to keep. And let's look at the Cubs for a second and see if they actually did even make a move. And no, unfortunately for the Cubs, they reached the conclusion that, they did trade Jeff Zahn. They got a token by trading Jeff Zahn to Toronto for a waivered player, Ross Grimsley. But they realized that nobody really wants Enos Cabell. And that's unfortunately because Cabell really plays well in 1983 and 1984 for the Tigers. But we've got a 4-year lull in between from 79 to 82, and he's just a 260 hitter and doesn't offer power much. And no one's really interested in Cabell in this timeline. So the Cubs, unfortunately, have to put him on waivers. Nobody wants him. Mercer as a trade option would be nice, but Cubs are going to hang on to him. He's got 3 interesting years as a kind of slugger. Plus, you have a DH in the National League, so that's why Mercer still brings value to the Cubs. He's got a very nice 81 year as a slugger for the going back to the Yankees, plus 80 and 79. They got 3 different choices of Bobby Mercer. So the trade talks for him as well cooled off. The Cubs are at 403.01. They're just going to sit a little longer. All right, Milwaukee started at 501.02, and we talked about moving Ashby. And I think there was one other trade in here for Milwaukee. Let's see here. Yeah, they got Craig Reynolds, who they're going to put on waivers, and traded Ashby. And that's really it. Because Cecil Cooper, Mike Caldwell, Jim Slayton has one more good year in 79, and Bob McClure. And of course, we're in a sweet spot for the Brewers as well. I mentioned the Expos. It's also the Brewers' time. 79 Brewers, 82 Brewers who went to the World Series. So we're in Brewer land, and yeah, they don't really need to do too much. They don't really need to go out and make trades. It all just comes onto the roster. Robin Yount can upgrade to an MVP of 1982, should he want to. Next team up, Vegas, and they started with 6 originally. And Vegas yeah, they traded a starting pitcher for Ed Haliki earlier in the off season. Forget which one that was. It was way up top here, right? Let's see here. Oh, Kevin Cobell, right? Because the Mets needed a lefty starter, and Cobell's actually got a pretty cool card. He's actually pretty good as a lefty starter. So that's who was one of their keepers, and he was traded for a waiver guy. And then after that, they said that Mike Torres is no longer a keeper either. He's now going on waivers because they realized that they like John Denny, Mike Torres, and Wayne Nordhagen all in the year of 1981. And you can only keep 2 guys in the year of 81. So it'll be Denny and Nordhagen. Nordhagen hits 300, and Denny has one of 3 really good years in the early 80s, 81, 83, and 84. 1 with Cleveland, 2 with Philadelphia. So that's what Vegas did by not making many moves, getting down to the 4. And then lastly, in this exercise for this evening, we have the Yankees starting at 6, and they got the 4 that they want. And we'll look at the Yankees 4. They made the move with Seattle to get Bucky Dent and to get Rich Gossage. They end up moving a waivered Ed Figueroa and then acquiring a waivered Rick Waits. So joining Dent and Gossage is Ron Guidry and Greg Nettles. And the other move was Lou Piniella. That could be an interesting player because he hits 300 a couple times for the Yankees. Lou was put on waivers. So that's another guy you would think that, it's like, hey, Lou, we're putting you on waivers, but we're going to re-sign you in the draft. You're not going to be out of the league. We'll definitely bring you back, but if somebody else claims you, good luck. So Nettles is definitely more valuable with Dent and Guidry and Gossage to this Yankee team trying to, win the World Series than Lou Piniella, who, as a corner outfielder, there are a lot of other guys out there available in the draft. So with that, we're going to stop again because this has been a little dry spell in the moves. As you can see, we only had, in all those 8 teams, we literally just had the one move of Alan Ashby for Craig Reynolds. As teams are now deciding to wait in this carousel and see what pops open. When does the dam break? And I can tell you some exciting moves that are going to be coming up because you got all these World Series caliber teams: Dodgers, Angels, Orioles, Royals, Pittsburgh. We're going to have to figure out, Baltimore's going to send Doug DeCinces out to the Angels, but he might actually go to a different team, and then another team might trade him to the Angels. And the Pirates and Portland has too many keepers. They have to figure out who to move. And the Angels are looking for somebody. And we talked about, Reggie Jackson and Rod Carew eventually go to the Angels, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen yet. They went to the World Series with Baylor, Downing, and Grich leading them. And they really didn't need Rod Carew and Reggie Jackson to come to them and help them out. As far as first base, Ron Jackson will hit .330, which is what you would expect from Carew. So they're going to hold on to Ron Jackson, and the Twins are going to hold on to Rod Carew. So we have one more installment, but there should be some fireworks because teams are going to finally start getting to the 40202 by the time we get to these last 8 teams. That's the 4th installment of this look, and I should have everything wrapped up with the proper math. And by the proper math, it means we're going to get to the 128, 64, 64. Here we are right now. 2 keepers over, 13 waivers over, and then we have 15 retired guys done available. That means I'm going to have to retire some players who actually still have some career left, which is really good. And again, pulling a guy out of retirement is no different than taking a guy off of waivers in the draft. So it's been a lot of fun getting through 3/4 of this, and the final 4th should be some fireworks. Thanks for checking out the 1979-82 off-season look. We'll see you next time.